welcome to another Agile IT Coffee with Conrad. Today we're going to be talking about a recent project we've done around Azure, AWS, and VPNs. How you doing this morning, Conrad?
Good. Oh, doing good this morning. After a 3-day weekend, this is a weird weekend with Memorial Day weekend in COVID, right? It's like, where do you go? I'm one of those hermits that didn't go to the beach or anything like that as much as I wanted to, but you find new things to go work on. And one of my things that I like to work on is cloud stuff. So that's kind of what I did. Did you do the same thing this weekend?
I went entirely on-prem this weekend. I got a new 12-core processor so I can do some video editing that won't lag out. Took my old machine, moved some pieces around, and now I've got a LAN party for my son and I here in my office.
You know, it seems like we're using cloud a lot more, yet I still have more devices, more computing capacity around me. It seems like it's like when we put all of our stuff in the cloud, I started printing more things. But this many years ago. But that's another topic. So anyway, there's one slider. There's really nothing that we're going to go show today. But I thought one of the things that I'd bring up is, kind of it's a common question for customers who, let's say you're already in Amazon, using Amazon web servers, and you're using it over there because of all the great stuff that you've been leveraging for computing capacity, whether it's for high performance computing, whether it's for it's just another place where we do site-to-site VPN tunnels and put in and have like common infrastructure. We have domain controllers over there, file servers over there, and you originally did that because it was an extension of your on-premise environment. Maybe you had some stuff on-prem and you put it in the cloud. And mind you, that same thing happens on the Azure side too. So but what I wanted to talk about was let's say you're in Amazon Web Services today and you have that infrastructure for whatever reason you're using it over there, but man, you can't help but like peer over a little bit over to Azure and say, man, they have some interesting stuff too. And maybe it's not just because I want to move what I have in AWS to Azure, because I'll tell you where where I love the Azure side of it. By the way, as one who's constantly in both of their web control panels, Azure, it seems like it was made in 2019, and AWS looks like it was made in 2002. Like, it is really just the mind mapping of everything is really bizarre over there, but I get it anyway. So but you really want to start to leverage some of the pieces, maybe some platform as a service pieces. And while you could do this without a VPN, you just feel better that any of the communication is done through, an encrypted line, if you will. So originally, and by originally, a few years ago, to be able to have Azure as a virtual network talk with AWS as a virtual network, there wasn't compatibility in there for them to be able to communicate with one another with their site-to-site VPNs. And one of the biggest reasons was the IKE v1 and v2 support on the AWS side. Azure supported it, AWS didn't have it. So the only way you could do it is on one side or the other. You would deploy a Windows server that would be able to have RAS deployed, so remote remote routing access services, I think is what's called. But anyway, which essentially is going to be a VPN termination, so that you can go through. But that just seems silly to go from one cloud to another, where all this stuff can go through, has to go through this other virtual machine server. Just one. I'm going to use a phrase popularized by our director of operations, Amy McGraw. It's gross, because it's not the way it should be, and it just gives you another place where there could be failure, another deployment. So, but now there is support on AWS to do IK v2, so you can do a site-to-site VPN tunnel with not much, really a lot of effort, if you will. The wording is a little bit different on both sides, so we might post a little blog post that we can help map the terms. I found some other resources out there, but they were guided but not really clean, I think. But anyway, but now you can actually have this VPN. So why really do this? So now that I have the site-to-site VPN tunnel connectivity between an Azure data center, I say that because you'll need different tunnels if you want to point to different data centers, if you will, and to put it so from an Azure environment to an AWS environment. Now, here's one other thing to consider a little bit on the tech side is remember when you deploy something in AWS, it'll say, where would you want to put it? It's like, oh, I would like to put it in US East. You want to put something in Azure, uh, in an Azure region, where would you like it? Oh, I also want it in US East. Are they the same? Turns out for US East, they are. They're both in Virginia. If you do East 2 in Azure, it's actually, I'm sorry, I think East 2 in AWS, or maybe it's Azure. I don't know. It's one of those two. It's actually Ohio. So, looking at the data center, finding out where their real location is, not just east, but east where? Oh, Virginia. Now they're close to one another, which means they're going to have less latency between the two environments. So now, again, why would you do this? Because, well, maybe now I have all this added infrastructure that I already have in AWS. I have a web server for my line of business application. I have a file server. I have AD, and I have people VPN in to go do things. But now what's going on with COVID, or we're just doing a lot more remote. We wanted to do more remote desktop. And by the way, is there an ability to do remote desktop inside of AWS? There is. They have this thing called, I think, workspaces or something, and you can virtual desktop, but it's a whole nother infrastructure they have to manage that's separate. But if you pivot over to Microsoft 365, if you are already if you already have the Microsoft 365 E3 or E5 license, or maybe you're looking to step up to it, that includes the licensing capability for Windows Virtual Desktop. So, one step closer. The second thing is, well, I still need the infrastructure, which you would pay on AWS or in Azure. But now if I can leverage all that capability inside of Azure, but all my other infrastructure is in AWS. Now we're where we want to be. So now I have that site-to-site VPN, so that when people are in WVD inside of Azure, your people who are using Microsoft 365, they're using Office, they're using Planner, they're using Teams, they're doing all this crazy stuff, and most of their traffic is going to Office 365. So we, by being in Azure, we can be more optimized in our traffic. Then the second part is, well, uh, the other traffic that normally people go to is out to the internet. But when they do need line of business applications, which isn't normally as high as you'd think, they're going to go through that site-to-site VPN tunnel. So this allows you to get closer to the infrastructure and platforms that you use all the time, and then but still leverage the infrastructure you already have in AWS. So now that there is this capability to do site-to-site VPN, it really opens the door to say, oh, well, does that mean I could start moving my other infrastructure to Azure? Yes. Do I have to? No. What would you move over first? I'd probably move over first applications that might be a little bit noisier on the line, and put it closer to that. And most of the times that's things that they're using frequently every day. But if so like let's say it's a line of business application that, let's say, you wrote, there might be a way to make that application more efficient. Like if it's a FAT32 app that runs inside of the desktops, maybe I need to do caching more. If it's a web-based application, maybe I can move the web server over with a partial view of the data, whatever that is. But anyway, so I thought I'd bring this up because this capability to do both connections really works both ways and gives you a nice transition if you wanted to slowly bring AWS over, or you didn't. You want to leave everything in AWS because you love it's fantastic. You've consumed a bunch of their resources, but you also made this big investment on the Microsoft cloud side, and you want to start leveraging what's best over there. And the fact that behind the scenes there's a site-to-site VPN tunnel just makes it really, really sweet. So it I think opens the door to be more flexible, to use what you want in a way that's very natural, which is one of the things I love to talk about in architectures, is using the natural capabilities of the environment. When you have to start hacking and putting in a VPN server and doing all that mess, it makes for an architecture that will certainly fail in a most wonderfully terrible way. So if now they have the site-to-site VPN tunnel, you have that. Now you have to pay for traffic. Both sides do the same thing. Traffic coming in is basically free. Traffic going out is what you normally pay for. So, but you got to go in both ways. So you'll pay a little bit of traffic here and there. So that's always something to consider. But there's a lot of ways to handle that in the future. Anyhow, so that's the thing I wanted to bring up. We've done this successfully. Traffic works great both ways. and in a secure fashion. So I was really jazzed to really see it work in that way, see it really working, and really open the door for customers to have greater flexibility for their architectures and not have to choose all one way or another. So anyway, that's something I thought I would discuss a little bit and share today.
Great, thank you, Conrad. It's interesting that you talk about that translation because almost exactly a year ago, on the 28th of May, I sat down with one of our developers and went through a translation between AWS terminology and Azure terminology, like the differences between compute and EC2, what is it, elastic block storage versus blobs, as well as providing maps of those regions we discussed. And I posted that link here in the chat. I will also put that in the comments on YouTube so that people can go and check that out because they are similar in ways, but the differences are striking when you encounter them.
Yeah, the one thing that was interesting, and yeah, it might be an interesting blog post, but when creating the site-to-side VPN on both sides, the you know the one thing to remember in the order is you you create the on the AWS side they call it the customer connection, and on the Azure side they call it I think they just call it a connection. And so you have to create the AWS one first for one really primary reason. When you create the AWS customer connection first, it gives you the IKE v2 shared passcode. You can't tell it what it is. It just tells you. On Azure, when you go to create it, you get to tell Azure, please use this one. Azure's like, cool, I'll use that one. So there's a place where I found that Azure has a lot of flexibility over properties and configuration, where AWS, a lot of times the only time you get to create it, the only time you get to set things is when you create it. So if you want to set it again, like you have to delete and put it in. I know there's other commands to go do it, but it's just a hassle. But that's the one little tip is you got to create that customer connection first. You have to download the config from a generic, get the key, give that to Azure, and then once you do that, 5 minutes later, boom, it just lights up. It's beautiful.
That reminds me of Paul Zorio. He's had to work in that environment. Why would you not be able to change it? You have
Oh,
to create it all over again.
DHCP settings are like that too. Like sometimes I go through, I'm like, okay, I get why you would do it that way, but I wouldn't do it that way. Oopsie. You'll edit that part out. All right.
All right. Well, I am checking here in the questions panel, and I'm not seeing anything. Um, so for those of you watching online on YouTube or on the blog, feel free to leave comments down below, and I will be happy to answer any questions as they arise. Give us a like and follow, and thanks for joining us. We'll see you on Thursday. Thanks a lot, Conrad.